Jimmy Kempski from PhillyVoice.com. He's the Eagles beat reporter. He's also the king of all stick figures. Follow Jimmy Kempski on Twitter if you're not already following him, just to see his wonderful irreverence of Eagles training camp and all things Eagles. He's our next guest here on the Sports Bash. Jimmy, how were your travels, my friend?
You're not kidding. It's a little difficult to get here.
You'll sum it up that way. Planes, train. I mean, you didn't ride in the back of a Ryder truck with the guy that sells shower curtain rings, did you?
Those aren't pillows.
Where's your hand? Between two pillows. Right. Del Griffith, that's the guy's name. So you're out there tonight, preseason game number 1. Eagles Nation is geeked up. What are we really going to see, Jimmy?
It'll be good to see him get back up on the field, but yeah, I mean, you're not going to see much preseason game, obviously. I don't know how much Carson Wentz is going to play. Doug Peterson kind of just wouldn't tell us 2 days ago when they last had practice in front of the media. So I would imagine he'll get a few series, maybe a full quarter, but I think they'll probably get him out of there fairly quickly, and then I think he'll see the bulk of his action in games 2 and 3 at home.
Let me ask you this about Wentz. Do you think that they're going to let him – because Aaron Rodgers, they've gone on record, Aaron Rodgers is going to play at all. In fact, we had a guest on from Green Bay in the 2 o'clock hour, and that guest said that they didn't think Aaron Rodgers would play much in the preseason at all, like just a little cameo appearance, because it's Aaron frickin' Rodgers, right? But do you think this is like maybe a little cookie to Carson, too, because he's so geeked about seeing Lambeau Field? Sure, get out, play one series, and then get out of there before you pull anything.
Well, I'm sure. I mean, I don't know this for sure, but my guess would be that when Rodgers was in the second year of his career as a starter, he played. I mean, I don't know that for sure, but I would imagine he did in the first preseason game, that is. So, I mean, for all the reps that Wentz can get in the preseason, you're not going to play him in the 4th game, obviously, because he's a starter. But, I think you do want to get him out there, kind of get his feet wet in that first week. A guy like Aaron Rodgers doesn't need it. He's going on a decade in the NFL, so he doesn't need that kind of action in the preseason. And certainly you don't want to get him hurt. Not that you want to get Carson Wentz hurt either, but I think it's more about just how young he is and getting him reps out there, because he is, kind of a developing quarterback still.
Jimmy, Nick Costco, thanks for joining us. In my mind, I think Derek Barnett can make the biggest impact as a rookie from this rookie draft class. What are you expecting out of him tonight?
Yeah, I agree. The weird thing about him during training camp was he really didn't he didn't really stand out in any way over the first 2 weeks of camp, and part of that might be attributed to, his bread and butter move in college was that kind of dip and bend around the edge, and it was frankly an elite move of his at the college level. We barely saw that at all during training camp. So what he was kind of doing was working on some of the things that he's not as good at. So, for example, like, Roy Halladay would just throw curveballs all day during, spring training. So I think it was more of him just trying to work on some things that he isn't as good at, which is kind of rare to see for a rookie. But once you get into the preseason, you do want to start seeing things. And ideally, you would have seen some plays, even with him working on things that aren't strengths. So we'll see how he progresses in the preseason. I would agree with you, though, that I think he probably has the best chance to kind of make his mark on this season as a rookie among the Eagles draft picks. I think Matt Collins will get some playing time. He'll absolutely dress on game day because he's a force on special teams. But yeah, but I would agree that Barnett would be kind of the guy that you're going to get the most out of this year.
Sticking with the defense, it seems like Robinson and Mills are going to be the starting corners, but obviously there's a lot of question marks surrounding that part of the secondary. How exactly are they going to rotate all these corners to see who gets the most playing time tonight, and how do they really evaluate them after this first game?
I think you're going to see a ton of C.J. Smith early in the preseason because they want to see if he can play or not. And you're also going to see a lot of man coverage. Like, you're not going to see a lot of zone looks. You're not going to see a lot of looks where they're trying to confuse the defense. They're just going to play straight up man, and they're going to see who can cover and who can't. So, you have, like you mentioned, Mills is certainly going to start for the season. Robinson will start tonight, to be determined if he'll be even on the team when they get the 53-man roster cut down. So they want to see if he can play too, or if they have to kind of make a panic move and trade for a corner or something along those lines. So yeah, I mean, obviously that's a position that they're going to be watching hard. Jim Schwartz has been asked regularly during training camp about the cornerbacks, and he's pretty much said we'll see. Like he hasn't it's pretty much obviously an open competition, but also he's kind of in the quote-unquote we'll see mode, just in terms of, what guys will be on the roster and if they'll look outside the organization for another corner.
Speaking of the secondary, I was reading your article a couple of days ago, Jimmy, about the secondary with Brian Dawkins. He's been mentoring and working with some of the safeties and the guys in the secondary. Talk about what you think the value of that has been for those guys, because I saw in your article you have quotes from guys like Nate Gary and others talking about how important it has been for them.
Yeah, everyone that I talked to had something positive to say in terms of, what they took away from his teaching. And that's not even his job. So, he's in the scouting department. And I don't even necessarily know that the coaching staff is asking him to do that. They could, for all I know, but I'm not sure about that. It's just he's just always around. He's at practice every day. And if he has something to say to, one of the players, and it's mainly the defensive backs and the linebackers, but if he has something to say to them in terms of, better technique to use or just kind of adding to their game to, what those guys are already doing, then he'll tell them. And those guys, clearly he has the respect of every player in that locker room. They all listen to him. They all understand that he's, certainly going to be in the Hall of Fame one day. So, you have a guy like Brian Dawkins telling you, how to improve your technique. You're going to listen. And I think a lot of those guys, like I said, they really respect what he's teaching them, and they're applicating it to their games. In fact, I think it was McLean had said that, maybe not the best example, but Jalen Watkins. Jalen Watkins, while he had kind of a down season last year, he was an awful tackler a couple of years ago. He actually was a pretty good tackler. I mean, he had some busted coverages and things of that nature last year, but he was a much improved tackler, and he attributed that to Dawkins working with him in his tackling. So he definitely has made some kind of impact. I'd be interested to see if at some point during his post playing career he does get into coaching in a specific coaching type of role as opposed to what he's doing right now.
Staying in the secondary, they signed Corey Graham. What do you expect us to see from Corey Graham in the preseason? Are you expecting to see him used as the main backup safety? Do you expect to maybe do a 3-safety formation with maybe one of the safeties kind of lurching down as a third linebacker? What do you think is the way they're going to use Corey Graham?
I think they're going to use him as a safety. It's a very short answer. The way that Jim Schwartz explained it was they liked a lot of matchups last year in terms of moving Malcolm Jenkins down from the safety spot into the slot. A lot of that was out of necessity, as he explained it, because they lost Ron Brooks and they didn't really have another slot corner that could go in and do that. So he played a lot of slot corner in necessity. But with a guy like Corey Graham, who is a good safety, and he's actually started all 16 games the last 2 years. Hasn't missed a game since his rookie season, which, he's been playing in the league for 10 years, so he's a very reliable player. That's a guy that you can put on the back end and maybe move Malcolm Jenkins into the slot on occasion, but do it on your terms as opposed to, reacting to an injury or whatever. So he gives you another guy that can cover. He gives you another guy with a lot of experience. He gives you a reliable player who seems to be never hurt. And I think it's actually it's one of those acquisitions where they first make it and you go, oh, that's weird. They need a corner. They don't really need a safety. Why they get him? But then when you kind of digest what the logic behind it, he really does kind of make a lot of sense for the personnel that they have.
Jimmy, looking at your 53-man projection just from the other day, you actually have 7 wide receivers making this team. Now that's kind of, it's a little bit of a stretch, but what exactly needs to happen during the preseason for your prediction to actually come true come week 1?
Oh, it's a stretch, huh? You think you're challenging my 7 wide receiver?
That's pretty complicated math right there to go over 6.
They've done it before. Andy Reid kept 7 at one point. My logic behind it is I think that, well, first of all, Marcus Johnson is a lock. There's no way he's not going to make the team at this point. So he's your 6th receiver after Alshon Jeffrey, Torrey Smith, Jordan Matthews, Nelson Aguilar, and Matt Collins. Those guys are going to make the team in addition to Marcus Johnson now. The 7th guy, the guy who I think played really, really well throughout training camp, is Greg Ward, the former quarterback from the University of Houston. Ranked team all year last year, actually. It's the quarterback. And then, he transitions to wide receiver. He's looked great out of the slot. So I wouldn't chance, leaving him on, trying to get him onto the practice squad and potentially having him get poached by another team. I just wouldn't do it. I think he's been that good. So that's the logic behind having 7 receivers. But I think that just kind of goes toward the improvement of that position. Like last year, I mean, the receivers on that team, awful. Like beyond Matthews and Aguilar, I wouldn't keep anyone, and they didn't, obviously. I mean, they had a lot of guys to that group, and you kind of see the results, or at least we have seen the results in the media, and some of the people that have been around practice every day have seen the results of that improved wide receiver core, because they've been very good throughout the entirety of camp. But I forget exactly what your question was on that, but yeah, I do think there is a chance that they do keep some of those guys. Obviously, there's the possibility. I mean, there's been a lot of kind of speculation or smoke or whatever you want to call it in terms of Jordan Matthews' future with the team. So I think there's still a chance they trade him. If they do trade him, then obviously it'd be a lot easier to keep the guys that I had listed as them keeping at the wide receiver position.
Jimmy Kempski's with us. He's the Eagles beat reporter for PhillyVoice.com. Jimmy Kempski on Twitter, JimmyKempski. Jimmy, when Mike Gill's usually here, he and John McMullen tend to use me as the tether ball back and forth because I ask about the kickers a lot. They make fun of me, but special teams is a factor, right? And
yeah.
What have the Eagles special teams looked like throughout camp? And do you think, I mean, Dave Phipp usually has good units, but I guess the Doran Boss deal with his injury coming back. I mean, we talked to the guy from Green Bay, and he said Crosby was actually missing field goals. So, I mean, it is a factor.
Yeah, I haven't paid much attention to it, if we're just going to be totally honest. I mean, there was one day I timed the hang time on Donnie Jones and the other guys. I forget, Cameron Johnston. I timed it. Yeah, I timed their hang time, and Jones blew him away. So I was like, all right, I'm done watching that for the rest of the camp. There's no way. And then as far as the kicking position goes, Sturgis doesn't have any competition. He's running on a post, so obviously he's going to be the kicker. I'm confident that he, is a good kicker at this point in his career. He had a good year last year. He kind of blew away Cody Parkey during training camp last year. He hasn't kicked as well this camp as he did a year ago. A year ago, he's awesome. But I think he's a solid kicker, and it just hasn't been something that's really been on my radar as a concern. And then Doran Boss, I think he's fine. I mean, I've watched him long snap a little bit here and there, and it looks, totally normal like he always has. So I know he did have that injury, and it was kind of a serious injury, but I think they're fine. And really, just look at their special teams units overall. They have so many really good special teams players. They added Matt Collins. They have Chris Maragos, who's one of the best special teams in the NFL, in my opinion. You have guys like Trey Burton, and right on down the line. It's been one of the best units in the NFL over the past 3-4 years, and I don't see why that wouldn't continue in 2017.
Yeah, and I appreciate you still discussing it, even though that's not maybe the unit that you stare at the most. So you've had a long day. You've traveled out to Green Bay. The Eagles play the Packers tonight. Preseason game number 1. You can hear that game right here on 97.3 ESPN. Our pregame coverage starts at 7. The kickoff is at 8. There will be times, I'm sure, during this game where you and the rest of the scribes in the press box will be wondering, God, can't we get a running clock, please? Let's hurry this along. But it is preseason game number 1. I do want to ask you, though, about Eagles. Pat, like, have you been to Lambeau before? The history that comes with just being out there in what's cheesehead country?
I have, yeah. I was here for Sam Bradford's career
coronation.
When I would call it the highlight of his career. When he went 10 for 10 in the preseason, they blew him out here, and so yeah, I was here for that game, and I tried to get out on the field and got a few steps away, and they're like, let me see your tag. And they're like, get out of here. So I gave it a shot, but I didn't quite make it all the way.
Right. So they're pretty vigilant.
It's obviously, a very historic place, and it's cool. Like I enjoy being here. It's probably the most confusing stadium to get around in terms of like the bowels of the stadium. Like I consider myself at least like a mildly intelligent person, but it took me like 20 minutes to find the press box when I got here, and I've been here before.
Jimmy Kempski's with us from PhillyVoice.com as we spend a few minutes talking about Eagles and Packers tonight. Preseason game number 1, what he's going to watch. Check out his work on PhillyVoice.com as well. And yes, the guy that we had on earlier said that the Packers secondary was struggling, and that was an issue for them. And I thought, dude, you want to switch roles with some of the guys we talk to on a regular basis? You're kidding me.
Yeah, that's like when you start arguing, no, our guys are worse. No, our guys are worse. No, our guys are worse. But yeah, no, apparently they had, they've I think it was Demarius Randall was a guy who was benched, but yeah, I can't imagine they're actually watching the playoffs last year. Those guys did kind of get toasted a little bit, but I can't imagine them being worse than what the Eagles have.
Jimmy, speaking of the cornerback position, there was a lot of conversation yesterday about Tremaine Brock, the former 49ers cornerback, and reports came out last night the Eagles were one of the 4 teams that reached out to Tremaine Brock's people with interest. If the Eagles were to sign Brock, where do you see him? Is he the number 1 cornerback, number 2 cornerback? How would you see him if he was thrust into this group?
I hadn't seen that report. I haven't done any research on him yet at all. I mean, I know he exists. I know he's a human being on Earth. I know he played for the Niners for a little while. I think he played for somebody before that, but I have to kind of dig in a little bit more on what he is as a player. A lot of times what you'll see from agents in terms of reports of that nature, whenever you see a report where it says these 4 or 5 teams have reached out to, that's coming directly from the agent. The agent can easily recognize that the Eagles corner stink, so he's going to include them in, as part of that group of teams. So I kind of take those reports. I don't know who it was. Who had the report?
It was John McMullen.
Oh, okay.
That's how we do.
Yeah, it's a player that I just really haven't done a ton of research on, so I really can't give my own 2 cents on what he is.
Well, that's because you're in multiple airports and rental car places and trying to make your way out there. It's Jimmy Kempski with us. Here's a guy you can answer about. So the Brandon Graham deal, where he has the chance to make more money. What was your whole takeaway on the Brandon Graham situation, where he kind of had his little hissy fit earlier, went home, came back, and all of a sudden they give him some language that says, if you do this, and if you do this, and if you do this, we'll give you more money.
Yeah. The report that came out that he was going to, hold out from training camp, and he wound up showing up, or not even training camp, but OTAs,
right?
Or not? Yeah, it was OTAs. There's truth to that. So I had heard similar things. I just hadn't reported it. I think the Eagles kind of throwing him a bone. It's, it's a small amount of money from what I understand. It's incentive laden. I hadn't even really looked hard at that. I got up at 5 and got to the airport. so I'm a little behind on that one, but yeah, I mean, it makes sense. He's I think in my view, he's an underpaid player when you look at the comparison between what he makes and his production, even though it's, production, maybe not necessarily in terms of sack totals, but just what he is as a player. I think he's a very good player. When you compare him with a guy like Vinny Curry, who's nowhere near the same kind of player, but, obviously Vinny Curry's paid a lot more than Brandon Graham. It's easy for Brandon Graham to just look at, what he is and what Vinny Curry is and the difference in their pay. And you can understand where a player like that would, think that he should be making more. And I agree. So, they throw him a little bit of a bone. Next year, it could become an issue again. Who knows? But it's not really, like you said, it's like if you do this or you do this or you do that, then you'll make it a little bit extra money. But it's nothing that is going to really thwart him from wanting more money next season as well. If he has a great season.
He is Jimmy Kempski. He's the Eagles beat reporter from PhillyVoice.com. We had Ryan Lawrence on earlier to talk Phillies as well, so we're going to that PhillyVoice.com a lot, and I urge all our listeners to go out there and check that out as well. Of course, I'll call you Jimmy Kempski, but I'll say today, for this day only, you're our version of Neil Page. We'll call McMullen Del Griffith, so if he tries to sell you some shower curtain rings in the press box, just gently walk in the other direction.
Sounds good.
Good stuff, Jimmy Kempski. We really appreciate having you on, and safe travels, and look forward to seeing what the Eagles and Packers do tonight. Jimmy Kempski from Eagles beat reporter from PhillyVoice.com. You can find him on Twitter at Jimmy Kempski.